I'm Kaz. Welcome to So Focus on Tour. Today I'd like to show you how to adjust a t-shirt. This is one of my favorite t-shirts that I bought at the end of last summer, and it's a little bit too long. So you can see it's almost a dress on me. So what I've done is I've actually popped a safety pin in where I would like to adjust the length to, and I'll just show you the process. Okay, so I've got the position of the finished length that I want. So this is the line where I want it to be finished after I finish sewing it. So I'm just going to get my marker out. And I pop a little mark at the spot where I want to be the finished length. Right, so we can't actually cut it on that line. We need to allow for our hem. So what I do is I actually measure the size that I want my hem. So the hem on here is just under 2 centimeters. So I'm going to go with 2 centimeters. So this is the 2 centimeter mark here. Right, so if I measure down from that line that I marked down to 2 centimeters, and then I'll pop a mark in there. So this will be the length that I'm going to cut off. So this is my finished length, and this is my cutting line. So I'm going to measure all the way around the t-shirt from the base of the t-shirt up to where I want my cutting line. And right, so this is actually on this line here. So I'm just going to make my way around and just pop a line where I want to cut my t-shirt. So by doing this, there's no guesswork, and we're going to have it all the same length all the way around. Now you might ask why I'm not going to cut this through both layers at the same time. I've actually worn this t-shirt a couple of times and it's been washed a few times, so it has gone slightly out of shape around the bottom edge. So this is actually going to help and straighten it up. Alright, so I've got my line marked all the way around, so now I'm just going to cut up to that line. And if you wanted to, you could actually draw a line all the way around, but I'm basically just going to cut from dot to dot here. All right, so we'll move that along. Now, if you've got the convenience of having an ironing board, you can actually hook this over the end of your ironing board, and it would be a little bit easier to turn it around. But because I'm working from my caravan, I haven't got an ironing board as such to put the t-shirt on, so I'm just using my wool mat here. Right, so I've got my piece that I've cut off here. So my piece that I've cut off, if I wanted to be thrifty, I could use it to make a hair scrunchie or something like that. So I might just pop that aside and I might use that for something else. Now the bottom of the t-shirt, once it's been cut, does have a bit of a tendency to roll. So what I like to do is just give it a little spray with some spray starch. So the spray starch that I'm using is Magic, and it's a quilting and crafting spray, but it's it gives a bit of stiffness to your fabric, so it makes it a lot easier to work with. Okay, so now that I've stiffened up the hemline a little bit, I'm just going to turn that inside out. And I'll just pop my hot hem roller on, and I'm going to turn that up 2 centimeters. So I've got the 2 centimeter line on a roller, and because this is made out of a special type of material, it allows you to be able to iron it with the hot iron. Right now I like to pop a few pins in. I don't like to go overboard with pins because they just get in the way. But if you pop them in so that they're going perpendicular to the hemline, as you're stitching, it will be quite flexible. Okay, so I'm just working my way around, and I'm putting the pins on the underside because when I stitch this, I'm actually going to stitch it from the right side. And we're almost back to the start. So we're up to the last little section. There's a little bit of a wonky bit there, so I'm just going to trim that off. Right, so I've got that all pressed now. That's all looking nice and flat. Just give that a quick press from the right side. And by pressing your hem before you actually stitch it, you're going to get a much more professional finish. Okay, so that's all ready to stitch. Right, now I'm going to sew this with a twin needle. So a twin needle actually has a single post at the top which goes into your machine, and then it has two needles. Now when you're using the twin needle, you need to actually thread both of these manually, and you're going to have two reels of thread in the same color. Alright, so I'm over at my machine and I've matched up my threads. So I've decided I'm going to go with the blue thread because most of the fabric around the hem is actually blue. There's a little bit of orange in the bottom, but that's going to look okay. Right, now I've only got one reel of the blue that I want to use. So what I've done is actually I've wound two bobbins. So one bobbin I have put into the machine, and then the other bobbin is the one that I'm going to thread up with the other thread so that I can stitch my two rows of stitching. Right, now a lot of the machines don't have two spool holders, so this particular machine has an extra spool holder that clips onto where the bobbin winder is, and some machines will have a little hole in the machine where you can put a second spool holder, but all of the machines should have a capacity to be able to take a second spool of thread. Right, so I'm just going to pop that on using the spool cap, and then I'm going to take both ends at the same time and take them through the process of the threading. Right, so when you get to threading the needles, you need to actually separate the two threads and then thread them manually into each of the needles. if you've got a needle threader, you still can't use a needle threader if you're doing twin needle stitching. And so we'll just thread that in. Right, now you'll notice that I don't actually have a foot on at the moment. I'm going to use just the standard straight and zigzag stitch foot, and I've selected my needle position to be in the center. Now the reason I don't have the foot on yet is because quite often I've seen people pop a twin needle in and then they go to do their first stitch and they actually break the needle, and the needle hits the foot and it snaps. Now these needles are between $8 to $10 for the set, and if you don't even get to sew on it, it makes it quite an expensive. So we've got that set on our straight stitch with the twin needle, and I always just do a little practice stitch to start with. So I'm just going to turn the wheel towards me and manually do that first couple of stitches just to make sure that my needles aren't going to hit my foot, and then I can start stitching. Alright, so that's looking very good, so I'm just going to snip that off, and you can see we've got 2 rows of stitching, and then on the underside it does a little zigzag stitch, so that then allows the fabric to stretch, or allows the stitching to stretch with the fabric. Now the other thing that we need to look at is the position where we're actually stitching. So ideally what we want is for the left needle to sit just on the edge of our fabric on the wrong side, and then the right needle will be stitching a little bit further to the right, which will then secure the fabric down. Now because of the type of fabric this is, I haven't actually overcast the edge. I haven't needed to finish that off because that's not going to fray once we've got it stitched. So I'm just going to line that up, and I can just feel where the ridge is, where my hem is underneath. So I think that's probably about right. Yep, that looks good. Right, so I've got it just so that it's just peeking over my folded up edge, and then that's ready to start stitching. Right, now what I'm looking at here is once I've got it set up, I'm looking at the markings on the machine. So the edge of my t-shirt is actually running along the 1 inch line on the machine and on the needle plate, and it's also lining up with this 1 inch marking as well. So we're not running any marathons, so we don't need to go full bore. Just take your time to stitch it, and as you're stitching around, just adjust your fabric. Make sure that you're keeping that edge lined up with the marking on the machine. And I'm also feeling the ridge of my fabric that's folded underneath to make sure that I'm still catching that under my stitching. some people like to stitch over their pins. It's actually better not to, because if you hit your pin, you're actually going to dull your needle and you're not going to be able to reuse your needle as much. Okay, and just keep adjusting the t-shirt as you're stitching around the edge. Make sure everything is sitting flat, and then be careful as you go over your seams. So sometimes if you go over your seam too fast, you can actually deflect your needle and the needle will bend and sometimes snap. So just take your time to stitch over the seam. And you'll notice I do actually stop sewing when I'm taking my pins out so that I'm not stitching crooked. Right, so we're nearly at the start again. So I'm going to snip my threads off where I started. And then I'm going to overstitch to finish off. Right, so I'm stitching exactly along the line where I started, and then I'm going to do a few reverse stitches there. And then we're finished. Right, so you can see that my hem is stitched very nicely along there, and on the wrong side we've got it caught just on the edge, just the way we wanted it to be. Right, so I'll just come back over to the iron again and I'll give this a final press. So the edge where I started stitching, we've got the over stitching, which will stop those ends from coming out, and we've got it stitched perfectly just so it's sitting right on the edge so that it's going to stay flat, and then that's ready to wear. Thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed my little video about shortening a t-shirt and using twin needle. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll be doing more tutorials, more tips and tricks for you in the future. My next video, I will actually be replacing the zip in my granddaughter's very much loved riff raff.